Police officers and first responders wear badges to let their communities know they are here to protect and serve. But that's not how it feels today, and the stress of the job is taking its toll, taking lives through suicide and post-traumatic stress injury. A Badge of Honor podcast features the cast of the same name, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno. Sam, John, and the team offer the first responders workshops through their critical incident stress management teams and mental health liaisons to offer state-certified T-COLE credit programs that save lives. It's time to smash through the stigma. It's time to heal from your injury, and it's time to back our blue. Welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast. Here are your hosts, Sam Horwitz and John Salerno.
Hey, welcome to A Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We are powered by the OBBM network, and we had a blessed Mental Health Monday so far. We're coming off a really great weekend with the Rowlett Fire Department doing a family workshop, and I tell you that really was an uplifting experience. We had great participation, great questions, and I think everybody left there with a super good attitude. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I think it was fantastic because it was the first time where the city of Rowlett was our sponsor, so we were able to bring in the fire department and the police department family members and really work together, which they rarely do. So there was a lot of exchange back and forth, pointing out the differences really between the job and how they deal with coming off of bad calls and how they can move forward.
Yeah, it was great perspective too, like you said, with all those components, with the family, the fire, and police. Like Jeff brought up, the fire department has a much better support network because they get, after the call, they get to sit around the table or sit in quarters and discuss it for a little while before the next call. Law enforcement doesn't have that option. They're boom, right off the next call, or they're alone in their car. So we had to, show a lot of self-help techniques for our officers that are sitting in the car.
And that's the beautiful thing about the entire afternoon. We get to do just that. And, this is the kickoff today of First Responder Wellness Week. And it encompasses everything from, your physical health to your mental health. And our guest tonight has, I'll tell you, one heck of a story. I know that the announcement kind of helped frame it for people going, wait, he what? And what happened? But he has an incredible story. We will get to it in a moment. But really, when you think about wellness, it's important to think about both facets of being mentally well and physically well. And sometimes if you are physically well, the mental wellness kind of just falls in line, if you will, because you're able to get a good night's rest to process the things that we see on a daily basis. But what I want to do is, John, let's bring in our guest. He deals with everything heart related, I will say, and I'll leave it at that. We're going to welcome Brandon Griffith from the Griffith Blue Heart Foundation to A Badge of Honor podcast. Welcome, Brandon. It's great to see you.
Hey, Sam. Hey, John. Thanks for having me on, guys.
You bet.
Coming on, man.
Let's let everybody know that it's watching and listening on your favorite social media app. Including Rumble TV, but how did you decide to get into law enforcement? Where'd you grow up, and how'd that happen?
So I was born and raised here in Arizona, and I was that ADHD troublemaker kid that got into all kinds of trouble growing up. I was every teacher's nightmare, but I grew up training martial arts from the time I was 4 years old. So being in martial arts, I was around a lot of military, I was around a lot of law enforcement. That structure, that discipline, that kick in the ass really pointed me towards either a career in the military or into law enforcement. And as I got older, I just realized that not only did I really prefer the way they carried themselves. They had a better attitude. They had a great sense of humor. They were badasses. But I knew that as soon as I did my first ride along that I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to go into law enforcement. I'm an adrenaline junkie. You get to help people. You get to make a difference. Like it was an instant calling for me. So it was something that I wanted to do because if I joined the military, I would have had to leave my high school sweetheart. So being able to go straight into law enforcement, I was able to stay with her, and I'm glad I did. She ended up saving my life.
Wow. What made you do that initial ride along, Brandon? Was it a program that was offered, or?
No, it was some of the guys that I was training with. They saw that I was a knucklehead and I was going down the wrong way, and they said, why don't you come out and do a ride along and see what it's actually like on the streets? And so I started doing a couple ride alongs with the guys in martial arts school, and it was eye opening. The culture, the brotherhood, the camaraderie, everything about it was an instant appeal.
It's things like that, those little things, and more departments should do that. I mean, New York, we don't do it. Probably the big cities don't do it, but a lot of the small towns, because that does change a person's life, and it gives someone a little different perspective of it. So I'm glad that they had that offered to you. More police departments should take heed in that and do that with some of the kids, with some of the youth.
Yeah, well, we know that the law enforcement culture has changed to the point where we know who's getting the ride-alongs now, and they're getting an eye-opening idea of what it is like to be a law enforcement officer on the job, having the practitioners out there trying to do de-escalation. I'm sure sometimes it works, but you all see the news stories about it's like, yeah, you need to stay behind the car on this one.
We don't get to choose the level of force, the suspect does.
There you go. That's right. It's a response to them, absolutely. And did Brandon, in your town where you grew up, was it always the sheriff's department, or did you have a choice? Did you look at a lot of different options?
No, actually, growing up, I wanted to be with Phoenix Police Department. They were the biggest agency. They had the higher standards at the time, and I went through the process and I made it through. I got hired on, and our academy class was the first one laid off in the recession in 2008. So we were like 2 weeks away from starting the academy when they laid off our entire academy class. And they said, "Hey, we'll get you guys through as reserve officers in the next 6 months, and then you guys can hopefully make your way to full time." 6 months later, they called their class and said, "Your application timed out." So I ended up getting picked up by another municipal agency where I spent, most of my career. I spent a decade over there. When the pandemic hit, I had to, all of the grants got canceled. All of our in-person trainings got canceled. So in order to keep the nonprofit alive, I had to drop to reserve to really focus on the nonprofit. That's when, Sheriff Lamb and Chief Matt Thomas over at Pinal County were like, "Hey, would you consider coming over here?" And I said, "You know what? Let's look into it." And I ended up joining the sheriff's office, and I couldn't be happier. I love it there.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think this is a first, John, about hearing about how a recession actually canceled the jobs of police officers, because usually you want to, preserve that because the money already went into it. You had mentioned, Brandon, the nonprofit. Let's just get right into that, because there's a story behind how Griffith Blue Heart Foundation got started. Let's just dive right into the deep end with that one.
Yeah, I wish I could say it all started with my story, but the reality is that the cardiac arrests had a profound impact on my life. The first time I did CPR, I was in high school. I lost a buddy in college to it. I had a family member go down from it. And I never in a million years thought that I would be the one that would suffer a cardiac arrest. But, my wife makes fun of me. I've been shot at. I've been in knife fights. I got pinned under a vehicle during a water rescue. And I died at home reading a book. Like, you just never know when your time is up. So I was sitting with my wife. I had just made my department SWAT team 2 weeks before. I was in great shape. There was no stress. I'd just done all my medical examinations. Everything came back perfect. Sitting with my wife reading a book. I said, "Hey, I'm going to take the dog out." I took 2 steps towards my door, and it was like, you ever have someone jump out and scare you? When your heart skips that beat, flutter in your chest? Well, imagine that feeling, but you can't recover from it. In that moment, I stopped instantly. And even though I collapsed within about a second and a half, you both know weird shit happens during critical stress incidents. You get time distortion, you get tunnel vision, you get auditory exclusion. For me, I was experiencing time distortion. I remember just stopping dead in the tracks and everything slowing way down. I remember sitting there and just bearing down and going, I can't breathe. And all of a sudden, I cannot take my next breath. And I'm trying to force myself to breathe. I'm trying to do combat breathing the way Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman teaches us, lower your respiration rate. But it turns out when you're in cardiac arrest, there is no blood being pumped to your lungs, so they physically cannot expand with oxygen. So I was in what's called agonal breathing, going trying to force myself to breathe, basically convulsing, right? My wife hears this, turns around to see my face is dark, dark purple, like someone choked a Smurf. She sees this and immediately pulls out her phone, calls 911, puts it on speaker. I fall backwards into my bookshelf, breaking every tear on the way down. It's not the one behind me. This is at a different house. But I break the bookshelf, and my wife goes to brace me. Now, I'm 6'4", my wife's about 5'3", so I topple right over her, put my head through the wall. I land on my hands and my knees, and I'm looking out into my hallway, and it's I'm starting to get tunnel vision, but it's nothing like I've experienced in the field where it's hard to kind of focus. It's this dark, dark purple, and like everything is closing in on me. Everything's fading out. And I remember in this moment, here I am, I'm a cop. I used to be an EMT. I'm an instructor. I don't know how many life saves I have, but in this moment, there wasn't a damn thing I could do to save my life. And that feeling of helplessness is not something I wish on anybody. I remember looking in my hall as it was fading out and just going, well, this is it. And then just right there, I dropped dead. My wife rolls me on my back. She starts doing compressions on me. She worked on me. She actually had the presence of mind to put my feet up on the couch in Trendelenburg. This is something we EMTs do for people that are in shock. That way gravity forces all the oxygen and blood in your leg to your core. I can't get ER doctors to think like that. And she did that working on her high school sweetheart. So she puts my feet up on the couch. She's doing compressions on me for about 4.5 minutes before she has to stop. The first responder arrived. It was a fellow police officer. So she had to stop working on me, go open the front door, pull the dog back. The officer comes in, sees me dead on the floor, and he starts compressing away. He did a phenomenal job. He was not equipped with an EAD, so he couldn't actually shock me out of it, but he was doing compressions on me, getting full recoil. He did a hell of a job. He worked on me until about the 9.5 minute mark when fire and EMS arrived. They dragged my body to the living room where they got more room to work. You know, they drop in an OPA, they IO drill my leg, they cut off one of my favorite Nirvana shirts. They worked on me. They shocked me multiple times. I was dead for 16 minutes and 48 seconds, I believe. So over 16.5 minutes before they got a pulse back. So as I'm shocked back, I remember just constant pain. Like I remember my chest had been caved in. I could taste the blood in my mouth where they dropped the OPA. You know, when you fall asleep on your hands and your legs and you get that painful tingling? Well, imagine that on steroids. It's everywhere. My leg, I could feel where I got drilled into, but worst was my head. My head felt like someone was just taking a sledgehammer to the top of it, and I was getting those white flashes with every single heartbeat. So my wife says that I sat up, I started pushing guys off me. I don't remember that part. She grabbed me by my face and told me not to leave her. I said I won't before I collapsed back. So I hit the ground again. They get me on the gurney, and from that moment, I remember all the details of my death going down, what I experienced on the other side, but for the next 5 days, everything else is a blur. Like I remember the sway of the gurney. I could hear the firefighters walking on the rocks in my front yard. In the back of the ambulance, I was cracking jokes, calling them hose draggers. I don't remember any part of that, but when I'm in the hospital, started the barrage of testing, and it was like I was in and out of consciousness when my brain was resetting from all the hypoxia and, you know, the concussion I sustained through the wall. So I'm waking up. SWAT team are there. My chief is there. I'm passing back out. I wake up. I'm sobbing for some reason. I'm passing back out. I wake up. I'm slow dancing with my wife in the ICU. Like it was a really weird time. And they run all these tests on me, and they find out that my heart is perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no genetic abnormalities. There's no congenital defects. There's no blockages, no plumbing issues, no electrical, no complications whatsoever. They broke my blood down to chromosomic levels looking for genetic mutations, and my heart was perfectly healthy. Turns out that from the time you're in the womb to the day you die, your heart sends electrical impulses. And one misfire is all it takes for you to go into cardiac arrest. And that was my time.
Do you think standing up, maybe when you stood up you put your heart into maybe an AFib or a VFib when you stood up, or was it a vasovagal reaction or something? Or
you know what, John? That's what I was gonna ask when we got to take our first break. Let's pick up with Brandon's amazing story. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
All right.
Move freely, America, without medical restrictions or penalty. Without medical freedom legislation in place, our rights and freedoms are one vote away from being dissolved. Move freely, America, with one voice, without fear of retribution, achieving a common goal, medical freedom. We the people make our voices heard by connecting with state legislators and engaging a constitutionally compliant medical Bill of Rights for all citizens. Individually, change is improbable, but as an aggregate, attainable. It's time to act with one voice. My voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
And my voice.
To protect our freedom, creating one voice that cannot be ignored. This requires your voice, too. Move Freely America. Go to movefreelyamerica.org to find a chapter near you. Plug in, donate, and help our legislators defend our God-given rights under the Constitution. Move Freely America. My voice.
And my voice.
And together with your voice, we're one voice that cannot be ignored. Donate today. MoveFreelyAmerica.org.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam. We have Brandon Griffith with the Griffith Blue Heart Foundation on with us today. And Brandon, before we took the break, you were just sharing an amazing heartfelt story about your career and your medical issue that you suffered. And thank God for your wife to stay in a state of mind and keep that mental mindset to, instead of panicking and freaking out and, jumping in, because we all know as, paramedics and EMTs that, the first couple of seconds starting CPR is critical. And, like so many counties and towns across the country, 9.5 minutes without CPR, you're a goner.
Oh, 100%. There's the fact that she had that presence of mind. I mean, we were both EMTs together before this. She had just been accepted into medical school, so she knew exactly what to do. But, to answer your question before the break, no, it wasn't Vegas. It wasn't. I was already stood up. I'd already petted the dog. I already told her I'm going to take him outside. It wasn't from the height changes. It wasn't dehydration. I'm telling you, I went down every single rabbit hole. I'm convinced what I had was called the RNT phenomenon, where it happened. I got a PVC contraction at just the exact wrong time, and it sent me into VF. But that's my personal theory. But they've tried for over a decade to figure out the cause of this thing, and there's been no diagnosis. My heart's perfectly healthy.
Wow!
I would have imagined that after this, the members of your department were there. Like, what happened at work? How long were you in the hospital? Since now it's like, well, you have this, but there's nothing wrong with you.
So I'll tell you that was just the beginning of the journey, right? So at this point, at 26 years old here, I'm a defensive tactics instructor. I'm a field training officer. I just made my department SWAT team as an operator. My goal, my dream, and literally in a literal heartbeat, my entire life changed. All of a sudden, I was damaged goods. All of a sudden, I lost my spot on my SWAT team, and it was, hey, we're going to try to find another position for you as a civilian in the department. What? It was, we can't have you out there with this defibrillator in your chest. And I was getting kicked to the door. And I was like, what the hell? What? There's nothing wrong with my heart. What do you mean you're kicking me to the curb? Like, just because I have this little device in my chest, you're going to kick me out now? Like, what is this? And, luckily, my assistant chief at the time, Chief Mark Mann, had my back. And this whole mental health roller coaster started after that. Not only am I dealing with literally dying and coming back, getting given a second chance, survivor's guilt for burying other friends who died in the line of duty, but there's a lot that comes with being a cardiac arrest survivor. The unspoken realities of cardiac survivorship or something that I could talk to you guys for hours about. But now I was a 26-year-old kid. My identity was too entwined with what I did as in the job. I looked at myself as I'm a cop. It's who I am, and that's bullshit. That's what I did, right? But at that time, it was crushing because all I wanted to do was become an operator, and I got 2 weeks in and was kicked to the curb. So I had to fight, and I had to fight to keep my job. All of a sudden now I was like, well, why can't I go back to the job with this defibrillator? And why am I getting forced out to the curb? I had to really dig in and look at the standards and, challenge not only risk management, but the city and, post, all these different things I had to go up against in order to return to full active duty. And I was successful. I went there and I said, look, I'm safer than any other cop in this department. Not only am I on medication to prevent it and do I get regular heart checks, but I have this device in my chest that'll shock me instantly if it ever happens again. And the chances that ever happen again are less than like 2%. So we got other guys in the department. We are, law enforcement as a whole is at a 70 times higher risk for heart disease than the general public. We are 25 times more likely to die from a heart complication than a violent encounter with a suspect, right? We have a 22-year less life expectancy per IACP than the general public we serve. and they were trying to kick me to the curb. When you got guys with insulin pumps and you got guys that are, a heartbeat away from a widowmaker, I was getting kicked to the curb. So I had to fight, and I was successful. I returned to full active duty. But when I returned to the field, that's when I realized how underutilized and unprepared law enforcement really is for the medical calls that we constantly respond to. It's kind of like an a la carte program. You got one class that'll teach you, here's how you use a tourniquet kit. Hopefully you never have to use it. Here's a CPR AED class that we may do every 5 years. Here's a TCCC, whatever it was. They weren't really using it. Most departments don't even have AEDs, but we're responding to calls all the time where moms are handing us their lifeless babies. I mean, we're pulling kids out of pools where we have our partners dropping. We don't have the tools. We don't have the system of care. There was this huge gap. And I started saying, there's something wrong here. We need to start implementing programs to support law enforcement as a whole, not just get them AEDs, but get them the legislation compliance, the medical direction, the policies. Are they even being dispatched to these calls? We had to create dispatch protocols. We had to create sustainability plans to finance these programs. We had to create an entire system in order for us to save more lives. And when we started doing reality-based training specifically for law enforcement, not only did we start quadrupling survival, but we also started making incredible impacts on non-fire EMS AED applications, getting people involved with tourniquet applications, hemorrhage control, excited delirium, drownings. All of these things started unfolding themselves. We started quadrupling survival. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. And that's kind of how we got into starting the nonprofit in this next chapter in my life.
And so did you poll the different departments? I mean, we know, or we should know that, when the EMS is called, they all have the AEDs, but we're talking exclusively law enforcement. And did you poll the different departments and find out that they didn't have any of this equipment? So it was equipment and training, or just equipment?
So yeah, just for example, in Arizona, we have 141 law enforcement agencies with 15,000 cops. In that, less than 20% actually had AEDs at the time when I started doing my market study and my research. When you start looking around the country, most states have a first aid block required in the academy, right? Mm-hmm. After they graduate the academy, whether they maintain it is up to each individual agency. So some agencies may be proactive. They may do it every 1 to 2 years, some maybe 5 years. A lot of them were just never again. It wasn't a priority. It was like on par with, this is how you use a fire extinguisher. And it's pushed back because, some civilian, the training is not made for law enforcement. Some firefighter, some, volunteer comes in, plays the PowerPoint and goes, you call 911, you get an AED. It's not realistic to what we do when that mom hands you the baby and you're looking to see if this is a shaken baby. When you're looking and you're doing CPR one-handed on an overdose patient and his uncle's in the room who you've arrested twice before and he's got a felony warrant. We have different safety considerations. We have other criminal justice aspects. We have other tactics we have to incorporate in these civilian bystander classes that were telling us that you're protected by the Good Samaritan law when we were not, weren't making the cut. So we really had to start looking at the system as a whole and incorporating reality-based training for cops and an entire system to support it.
Do you, Brandon, the liability factor, do you think that has anything to do with it on a governmental standpoint where they're like, you're a cop, we don't want you touching the patient? Is there any concerns there with liability? They're like, well, we don't want you doing this. Do you think that plays a role?
So look, we're not making cops EMTs. We're not making them medics, right? Your cops are already plugging bullet holes. Your cops are already using Narcan. Your cops are already doing CPR on people in the field. Why wouldn't you give them the other piece of equipment to actually save somebody's life and teach them how to do it at a high performance level, right?
High school coaches use AEDs.
So right now, cops are getting sued around the country for not providing aid. Most agencies, when you go around the country, I have yet to find a state that does not have a statutory requirement requiring cops to provide aid. We don't get to sit there and say, hey, tell fire department to hurry up and stand there anymore. Because guess what? We have these little litigation devices on our chest called body cameras. And when the family watches that body camera footage and sees you standing there for 15 minutes waiting for a fire truck to pull up, you're getting sued for failing to act. If you don't take care of the person you just shot, if you're not using the Narcan that you've been trained to, if you're not doing compressions on that person, you are getting sued. But the problem is that most AED programs are failing in the first 2 to 4 years. They don't have the system to support it. They don't have the finances for it. They don't have medical direction. They're not reporting their usages. Most of them are not in compliance. They're looking at it like a tourniquet, like throw it in your car and hopefully you don't have to use it. But most states have got requirements, legislation requirements, reporting requirements. And a lot of times you have, somebody who's a strong champion, commander used to be a medic, or, so-and-so is in charge of this program. He's our SWAT medic. When that person fires, retires, or leaves, all of a sudden that program crumbles because they didn't make it a part of their culture. They didn't make it in their policies. They didn't put their SOPs together for it. They didn't get their medical director involved. The whole programs are crumbling because they don't have a system of care. And currently, Griffith Blue Heart nonprofit is the only organization that's offering a complete package for cops. And I got to tell you that our resuscitation scores are blowing people out of the water. Cops are phenomenal at doing high performance resuscitation.
Yeah, we'll talk about that and your program and how it's done, because we have one of the sponsors of our show, Rockwell CPR. I watch all these folks getting trained every 2 years, but we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay tuned, everybody.
Interested in starting a podcast or TV show? Worried about what you'll say and how to keep it engaging? Think you'd like to be a guest on podcast, radio, or TV shows? Hi, I'm Susan Hamilton, owner and founder of OBBM Network, and I would like to invite you to an OBBM media training to get the tools you need for a relaxed and polished performance you'll be proud to share. Our specialized training techniques include role play, voice training, and everything you need to deliver a confident, clear, and engaging interaction. Go to offbeatbusiness.com. Go to the calendar and register for a training that's convenient for you. Dates available now, 214-714-0495.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with our guest, Brandon Griffith, with Blue Heart Foundation, Griffith Blue Heart Foundation.
We're a nonprofit. I gotta tell you guys, everyone calls us a foundation. A foundation gives grants and monies. A nonprofit does services. So.
I apologize. Before we took our last break, we were discussing, your medical issue that you had. At what age was it? 26.
26, yes, sir.
26, and you got thrown into this world when you had to fight for your job to keep your job, and then you come up with the nonprofit. And now you're training our law enforcement officers in street medical care. And what I want to touch on too is you mentioned 9.5 minutes before, which I'm thinking is a pretty good response time for especially where you're located. I just saw the response times in New York City for some of their medics out of the FDNY, and it could be as far as 11 to 14 minutes. Now, you being, so well versed in this, we know the first 4 minutes is critical in any type of situation. Cops' response times are usually under 6 minutes, when our medical care is sometimes over 14. So it would only be wise to keep our law enforcement, who will be first on the scene, trained and updated with all these important tools and knowledge.
100%.
John, real quick. Sorry, Brandon. We had in our live stream, one of the folks watching, Ray, and he says, "How about the need in Indian country law enforcement?" And Ray, definitely with the show notes and everything, you can reach out to Brandon directly, right, Brandon, through the website.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna put your website up right now.
And John, to answer your question, when you start looking at it, the National Fire Protection Association has a goal of 6.5 minutes and 90% of the medical calls. None of them are even close to that. When you start doing public records requests, and I do this all around the country, most fire and EMS is not getting on scene until about 7 to 18 minutes, right? When you look at priority 1 calls for service for law enforcement, particularly municipal agencies tend to get there with it before the 4-minute mark, right? And we know that that's critical. Time is our critical barrier. For every minute you don't initiate compressions or in defibrillation, the chance of survival drops 7 to 10%, right? So a lot of problems we encounter is that agencies, even the large ones, don't even get dispatched to it. As soon as it's labeled as a medical call, so-and-so's, my husband stopped breathing, my kid just collapsed on the soccer field. They go to fire and EMS, and then maybe after they input the call, take 2 or 3 minutes, they might kick it back to the police department, which is why cops are getting on scene 6 minutes. But when they're getting co-dispatched, our officers getting on scene within the first 1 to 4.5 minutes, where we have the highest likelihood of survival. That's where cops can make the biggest impact. But most agencies are not taking an honest account of their dispatch protocols and saying, are our officers even getting responded to this? Or does it kick over to fire and EMS? Then they play around with it. Maybe they do a formal request. Then we might notify one of our officers or send them a message. No, we need to be code dispatch, especially when you got a cop who's on a traffic stop right around the corner and they have no idea they could have saved a life. Any officer in the country would jump at the chance to save that baby or to, respond to that football field and start helping a kid.
Now, without getting political, I was just going to say, do you think this has this policy and procedure? Because I know, like Philadelphia, and I know Louisiana, the manpower is so shortened, and they're not in Philadelphia. They're not even dispatching law enforcement to non-priority one calls or past calls anymore. Do you think the minimal manpower staffing issues play a role in this?
When you got a role, yeah, but when you look at it, what is our highest priority? Preservation of life, right? The preservation of life is our highest priority. That's the reason why we respond to everything we do has to do with saving lives. We write tickets to prevent traffic accidents. We make drug arrests to prevent drug overdoses. If we don't prioritize our number one cause of death, what are we going to prioritize? If you start looking at statistically, we lost 42,000 Americans to motor vehicle accidents last year, 60,000 from uncontrolled bleeding, 107,000 from drug overdoses, and almost 700,000 Americans from heart disease. Yet we spent all this time focusing on our firearms training, and we only had 1,176 fatal police shootings. Where are our priorities, right? When it comes to this, we spend so much time on perishable skills. Well, compressions are a perishable skill. Being able to slap a tourniquet on one-handed in the dark while someone's bleeding out in front of you is a perishable skill. If we're not going to prioritize the preservation of our officers, of our first responders, because there's plenty of times where fire and EMS, it's not safe for them to come in. One of our board members that was ambushed with his buddy was killed, and fire and EMS refused to come in for 47 minutes because the guy was still inside the vehicle. This happens all the time. And if we're not going to prioritize our own lives and the community members that we serve, what are we going to prioritize?
Right. I think it's interesting because I'll say the average person whose job requires CPR, first aid, they have to do it every 2 years. And whether you're long-term or home health aid to babysitting, and they have to do this every 2 years to keep their skills. They're getting trained on the AED from adult to infant to pediatric. I never thought in a million years that this wouldn't be built into the training of our first responders, our law enforcement, that they would have that. I could understand maybe because of budgets, the AED thing, but that's where you come in, Brandon, because that's how we connected. And it's like, well, tell us how Griffith Blue Heart comes in and fills that gap for our law enforcement agencies.
So we offer multiple services for law enforcement, and one of the biggest things that we do, our real bread and butter, is our training and our programs. So when we partner with an agency, we come within, we present to their command staff down. So if you don't have buy-in from the top, don't pawn us off to some training sergeant who's got too many things on his plate. If you don't get buy-in from command staff and they don't see the why in the mission, the program it's dead in the water, right? So we partner with command staff. We look at the entire system. What is your community's needs? And when I pull their numbers and show them, this is how many people died in your jurisdiction. Here's your response times. Here's your fire department's response times. Here's the impact we foresee you to actually be able to make in your community. We start looking at unique funding routes from law enforcement. We start helping them look at different ways to fund it, or we get grants for it, or whichever way we have to approach it. We then also look at their policies. We look at their dispatch protocols. We look at their chain of command. We look at their legislation compliance, their medical direction, and we look at their training. And most of the time they have nothing for the training, or it's like a simple, civilian CPR course to give you a little card and slap you on the back and you're done. No one pays attention to that stuff, especially nowadays with all these companies going virtual. Who's going to sit there and watch a video and then do these little skill things? Cops don't take that crap serious. It's the same thing as learning how to, use a fire extinguisher online. It's like, come on, guys. So we know.
Yeah, I never understood the online classes.
Based on how law enforcement learns, we are hands-on learners. We have to test our skills. We have to have stress inoculation. That's why shooting a piece of paper does not prepare you for a gunfight. You need stress inoculation, force on force, low light conditions, hostage rescue, barricade, active shooter, all these different things to make it work. But we don't do that for resuscitation. Why aren't we testing our skills with actors screaming in our faces? Why aren't we wearing wearable wounds that spurt blood we have to tourniquet on? That's why we created our program, is to implement that. All of our guys come from the SWAT background. All of our guys come from reality-based training and understand how law enforcement learns and how we work. So when we created our program, it's kind of a crawl, walk, run methodology. You have classroom, you have skills learning, but the whole rest of the day is reality-based training scenarios. So you're actually dealing with overdoses, suicidal patients. You're dealing with TCCC officer down drills. You're putting your skills to the test. You're using feedback mannequins that measure depth, recoil, fractionality limitations. You're actually having to place that tourniquet correctly or it doesn't stop a bleed. You actually have to pack wounds. You actually have to open up and use your Narcan on an actor. If you don't test those skills, you lose them. And a lot of times, even the most experienced guys out there think they know what they're doing, but they can't put the tourniquet on appropriately when someone's screaming in their face or someone's fighting them, right? So if you don't make it real, it's not going to click. And that's what Griffith Blue Heart really took to the table, is we took that kind of learning and adapted it to medical calls that our officers actually respond to.
Well, that's amazing. If you guys are just tuning in, we are talking with Brandon Griffith from Griffith Blue Heart, and he's explaining how the training works. I want to talk about these realistic mannequin things. We got to take a quick break. We will be right back.
Look, when you need to respond to an aggressive situation to protect yourself, your family, or your property, understanding your firearm and legal position are critical. Officers know your skills are only as good as your commitment to training. So know what you're doing. So when you're in a vulnerable situation, we can count on your response. Whether you're a beginner or a licensed gun carrier, Carry in Texas offers basic firearms training, Texas permitless carry courses, license to carry, and basic 2A courses so you can understand the responsibilities, situational awareness, and learn the technical skill required when you carry your firearm. Go to carryintexas.com to find the right course for you. Join me, former United States Secret Service agent Samantha Horwitz, on the range for beginner basics, LTC prep, and range practice. Go to carryintexas.com today. That's carryintexas.com.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam, with our guest Brandon Griffith of Griffith Blue Heart nonprofit. Did I get it right this time, brother?
Yeah, bro, you got it.
You know, before we took a break, you have an amazing story from beginning to end. But, you know, one thing that you do, and going back to what you said prior, when you're setting up, you want the buy-in from the chief down, is you show impact studies. And that's where the big chief, that's where those all the gold on their thing, when they see an impact study that can't be disputed, they're like, ooh, now we need this. And I think that's where a lot of places fail, is because they don't show the results of what their training is going to do. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is probably one of the most valuable assets any chief or higher up is going to look at.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that, you know, if you're not doing data collection, analysis, and continued quality improvement, you're doing your agency a complete disservice. Just like, you know, going up and shooting a piece of paper on the range is not going to prepare you guys for a gunfight. They need to do force on force. They need to test their skills. They need to do different environments. They need contact cover, shooting on the move. All of those things are very important to actually being able to win in a gun encounter, right? Same thing when it comes to these medical responses. If you're not collecting the data, if you're not doing cold start evaluations, if you're not doing it under stress, if you're not showing the results at the final evaluations, showing proficiency, what is your program doing? It's the equivalent of it being like, hey, this is a gun. This is how you load it. This is how you cock it. This is how you shoot a piece of paper. Okay, there's an active shooter across the street. Go take care of it.
Yeah.
What? Same thing when it comes to this. Okay, here's a PowerPoint. Here's a clicker mannequin. Take 2 seconds doing compressions. Hey, you're certified. Now get out there and go save that person. You're going to be by yourself for the next 18 minutes, and you have to land a helicopter and do some other stuff too, but good luck.
Yeah.
Right. So for these mannequins that you talk about, they're simulating, just, they must cost a lot of money, because you said they like squirt blood, and where are these mannequins coming from?
So we actually wear, for when it comes to the trauma courses, actually Techline Trauma makes wearable wounds that hook up to a Camelback backpack that spurt blood. So we have real actors. You're cutting clothes off of our actual actors that are spurting blood, that are fighting you, trying to prevent this, you know, they suicidal or whatnot. You have to actually have secure weapon systems. You actually have to restrain people. just like we're doing on the field. You actually have to test your skills in a real environment, right? And as they're working on them, we also have feedback mannequins that are high fidelity feedback mannequins. And honestly, they're not much considering what we spend on Milo and all these other different programs out there when it comes to reality-based training, simulations, all that stuff. It's cheaper than most of that. But they have feedback mannequins that measure depth, recoil, fractionality limitation. It'll actually show you how well you're performing on it and give you an actual baseline score. So we're able to take officer scores before they start the training. We're able to do it under stress, and we're able to do it at the final evaluation. And I got to tell you, cops are better than doctors and nurses when it comes to resuscitation. You look at the programs in hospital, nurses and doctors have to go back every 60 days, right? Just to show proficiency. And a lot of times their scores plummet. They have to do a little demonstration, do a little skills thing every 60 days. Our officers are graduating our program with a 98.02 percentage. And then we're going back 6 months to a year later, and they're still in the 90th percentile. They are blowing them out of the water. Why? One, we're competitive. I want to beat my buddy, right? Two, we understand perishable skills. And when you incorporate that with reality-based training, the results are incredible. And we've been doing a 3-year study on law enforcement resuscitation. We're going to be publishing later this year, and I can't wait for it to get out there.
Wow.
Let me ask you something, Brandon. After an officer takes the training, right? Are there online programs or further training to refresh in skills if they need be?
So what we do is we do train the trainers for your agency. We're going to teach your trainers how to run this program and be able to incorporate this into your advanced officer training blocks. Whether it's a 4-hour thing or 10 hours, based on your agency's needs. I'm not going to come to your door and tell you how often you have to train your guys and do it. We're going to show you what proficiency level you should be at and how to get there. We're going to give you the tools, the concepts, the principles in order to incorporate that. Because what works for a large agency like Phoenix PD may not work for a small mountain town with 12 guys. What works for a sheriff's office is very different from highway patrol or the feds, right? But the same training, the concepts and principles translate across the board, and they're very scalable. So when we go in there, we do train the trainers. We show them how to go back to their agencies and run their own programs, and they get to incorporate that based around their policies, their use of force continuum, their exact needs. And then they get to figure out, all right, let's demonstrate proficiency. If I go back a year from now and my guys are still doing high performance resuscitation at a 97% average, do I really need to check them and put them through the training every year? No, if my guys are doing that high, maybe every 2 years. If at 2 years they're still in the 90s, maybe let's push it to 3 years. It's going to be based on your guys' performance, just like with firearms. If you go out there and they can't shoot the side of a barn, you're going to have to do some more training blocks. You're going to have to step it up. If they can't perform reality-based training scenarios, they're going to have to go back to the shoot house. It's the same thing. We just have to be able to scale it and measure it for your individual agencies.
What's the biggest need for you all?
Biggest need always comes down to funding when it comes to getting the life-saving equipment, right? These AEDs are very expensive when it comes to pads, battery replacements, ongoing care costs. It's an expensive program. So being able to find the right funding, being able to get grants, being able to get this life-saving equipment into our officers and deputies' hands is a big deal. So being able to get those the kind of financial support to be able to support agencies is probably our number one obstacle. Everything else, it's very easy for our guys to help you guys write a policy or to update your dispatch protocols or do some reality-based training concepts. But actually finding the funds to actually purchase AEDs for your entire organization and outfit them and get your guys competent is a whole other beast.
So for those of you who are watching, you can see I've put the website up throughout the podcast. It's griffithblueheart.com. For you guys that are listening on your favorite podcast app, that's GRIFFITH blueheart.com. And you can go over there, help out. Because as you can hear from Brandon, I mean, talk about passionate. The guy died, folks. He's here with us now. I mean, his wife went into action, and they discovered this glaring deficiency in law enforcement. And we're the first ones usually on scene. And Brandon, you're right. I mean, we can't stand around and do this. And I will speak to some of the agencies that we're connected with that are teaching and that are requiring it, that can do it, but can you really do it under stress? Are you practicing? And it's just like, John, you went through the academy, I went through the academy, and you got to practice like you play. And
yeah, but you bring that up, Sam, and that's a really good point, because And what Brandon's saying is, you had different training than the NYPD. You had federal level training. I had New York City shoot the target type of thing. It was not until only like years later they said, "Oh, we're going to teach you how to shoot in the rain," and started spraying us with hoses or shooting from behind cover. And a lot of departments, especially those like Brandon said, those mountain departments in Arizona that only have 12, 15 guys. They don't have the equipment. They don't have the time to be doing this because they're short staffed or underfunded or whatever. And this is a key point in a key role in law enforcement to have all the best tools available for our officers during any situation.
Absolutely. And how about here in Texas, where some departments are so small, maybe you have 2 full-time and 3 to 5 reserve officers. Hey, we got to take our last break, and we will come back and talk about how you guys can reach out directly to Brandon. Because Brandon, I'm getting on the live comment stream, people looking for you and what you do. So we'll be right back, everybody.
To the Health Engineer Show. I'm Clint Duquay, the Health Engineer, right here on the Offbeat.
Hi, I'm Larry Cortampa.
Hi, my name is Susan Hamilton, and you're watching Offbeat. Hi, this is Doreen Milano. Welcome to Big Ideas Small Business, where we will talk to Terry Arjala.
Hey, welcome back to a Badge of Honor podcast with John and Sam and Brandon Griffith. Man, if you missed any part of the show, this is all about teaching our law enforcement, training our law enforcement for a live action performance, be it within a combat situation or a medical situation. And Brandon, your team goes out there. Now, is there any, like, you'll train 15 guys in it, or you'll train 1,000 guys, right? No department's too small or too big, right?
No, so I mean, even for like Phoenix Police Department, one of the 5th largest in the agency, we went out and we taught their actual public health and safety division, right? We taught their trainers how to go back and they create their program and then train their agency based around their needs. That's what we do, is we do train the trainers. We go to agencies all around the country. This year we're going to Hawaii and Virginia, Washington State, Colorado. We're all over the place. And we'll do regional trainings for multiple agencies and teach you guys how to be trainers and use each other as resources to implement this kind of programs. Because we realize
what's the length of training?
We have a 2-day train the trainer course that is 20 hours, and we have a 1-day just standard operator course, which is 10 hours.
Okay, that's fantastic. So you have 2 different courses. Folks can connect with you. GriffithBlueHeart.com is the website, and Ray is putting in some great comments about some of the Indian nations, and if it's a way to possibly advertise or get the word out to them to be able to be part of the group. Because talk about response time, depending on what nation we're talking about, it can take a long time.
I worked
let me tell you something just on that. When we talk about response times, when we went to the Navajo Nation over in New Mexico, their average response time, because they only have, I think, 6 officers, it could be up to 2.5 hour response time. Because if they're on one side of the reservation, it could take them 2.5 hours to get to the other side. Because some of those reservations, like the Navajo in New Mexico, is the size of West Virginia. So if you're on one side of the state, if you're on one side of the reservation, that's a long way to travel. So Ray is right, man. The reservations who are undermanned, understaffed, and cover a huge area would benefit in all this training.
100%. I mean, a lot of these reservations are also contracting fire and EMS groups off the reservation. So it's taking them even longer to get out there. Even if your cop does get on scene within 45 minutes to an hour, it could take another hour or 2 before they come in. I mean, they're flying people out for minor calls, and they're getting these huge medical bills from these medic flights, but being able to get your officers to be able to save somebody on scene. But community response programs as well. When we work with the tribes, and we've been able to work with several of them, we also incorporate other programs too, because they hold their elders in such high esteem, right? So they have services where they're cutting lawns or delivering prescription meds or doing things for their elders. Well, why don't we train them with the law enforcement? Why don't we get them an AED? why don't we get them in their community centers and start teaching their youth a part of it? That way they can start making the differences well before EMS services can ever arrive on scene. So it has to be a system. It has to be a care. And I've been able to preach this and work with them at the Indian Country Intelligence Network and National Native American Law Enforcement Association. I also do the health and wellness side of this and talk about so being able to go in there and talk to them on the health and wellness side, as well as systems of care and resuscitation, has been a huge impact.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, OBBM Network has been fantastic. You guys, like John said, if you miss the beginning of this story, you want to go back and listen to it because it is amazing. Brandon, we are so happy that you are with us, that, the big man upstairs, however anybody believes, said, nah, I don't need you in my camp. You got to stay down there and be a warrior and continue making a difference and bringing this forward to make a difference in an even larger way, working with so many incredible people that are servants, from their heart. So folks, reach out to Brandon, griffithblueheart.com. I've had it up the almost up and down the whole show, and you'll be able to catch the replays tomorrow. Brandon, thank you so much. We wish you all the best, and thank you to your wife for jumping into quick action, knowing what to do, and it's amazing. It's amazing what you guys do.
Brandon, I'm gonna be up at Gallup PD, meeting with the chief later on in April. I'm gonna bring your program up to her because the Gallup alongside the nation would really benefit from this program.
I'd be honored to, man. Thank you so much for having me on. This is how I earned my second chance. I did have an experience on the other side, and this is something that I take wholeheartedly. And on the mental health side of this too, like, this isn't my story. This is my wife's story. I was laying dead on the ground, right? We forget those that actually have to save us. We forget about our first responders, our spouses, those that have to do compressions and apply tourniquets, and they're the ones that are living with the traumas while we were unconscious. So, I mean, it's important that we incorporate them too, and realize that there's a lot more to do. This is just the physical side of it. When it comes to mental health post-incident, there's a whole lot of other needs too. You guys, that's a whole other podcast though.
Yeah. We'll touch on that one day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brandon. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Brandon. Take care. Wow.
What an incredible, this is like, you think about, okay, first responder, you think about, well, why wouldn't they have the tools to be able to take care of, a kid that they pulled out of the pool or anything related to cardiac issues. And I was shocked, no pun intended, that with the AED that they didn't have, that a lot of departments only did it once in the academy and never kept it going. So griffithblueheart.com, let's get these guys some additional funding so they can continue what they're doing.
They give you the whole package. There's no reason. I mean, they put everything in a nice package, put a bow on it, and hand deliver it. You can't beat that. You can't beat that.
Exactly. So send your folks to train the trainer 2 days, and then you got the 1 day course as well. And we have got to mention one of our partners, Overwatch Peer Support. We talked about them at our workshop on Saturday. They have got a new family group that they have just launched. So you can go on our website. All of our partners are listed on the front page of our website. Check out Overwatch Peer Support and their new family group. And coming up in terms of events, April 5th, we've got Laughter Saves Lives is doing a benefit show to the funds come to a badge of honor, so we can turn those funds right around and give them to first responders who want to come to our workshops, which is key to healing mental health and addressing those things that are missing on the wellness side in the departments. And that is April 5th in my hometown, Rockwall, Texas. Yes, thank you. John, what do they need to do besides go to our website, because it's got a beautiful get tickets here?
Yeah, you can go to either badgeofhonor.org or you can go to laughsaveslives.org. Click on the events page and go to April 5th. The tickets are only $20 online, $25 online. You can go to and it's going to be held at Sideways Cafe, a beautiful establishment where you can eat some barbecue, drink some beer, just relax, kick back, and enjoy some laughter and decompression and healing. And like Sam said, all the proceeds will go back to benefit and scholarship our first responders into mental health workshops.
Yeah, so this workshop's open to everybody. This is not closed to first responders. It's because we Laughter Saves Lives is bringing in professional comedians from across the country. You'll know them when you see them, when you go to buy tickets. You want to get your tickets online because they're $10 more at the door. Again, a wonderful night of comedy. Come on out and join us at the beautiful harbor in Rockwall, Texas. And these guys that we talk about every week, Carry the Load. We are participating in the Memorial May March in Dallas at Reverchon Park. We are blessed to be nonprofit partners with them once again this year. And what that means is when you join our team or you go to our page to donate, all the money comes back again, gets turned around right out to the first responders, our veterans, and family members so that we can provide that continuum of care when it comes to our mental health, wellness, and resiliency. So you can go to our website, click on the Carry the Load banner. You can find us, join our team, or donate, and you'll be seeing other posts that we'll be putting out as it gets closer to the huge May event, which last year drew more than 10,000 people to the beautiful Reverchon Park in Dallas. To all of our first responders out there, we are praying for you every single day. Thank you for what you do each and every day in the communities around the world. And you do a thankless job. So if you're out there, you see a first responder, just say thank you. Just say it goes a long way, and it's a wonderful thing to do. And for all of our veterans, thank you for serving, for doing what you did so that John and I can do a show like this every week. To all of our active duty personnel out there across the globe, thank you for keeping our shores safe here at home. John, take us home.
I just want to give a big shout out to Rowlett PD, all the chiefs and staff, and to all the people that came to the workshop. Thank you guys so much. It was one of the best workshops we've ever provided. And thank you very much for opening the doors to us. Until next week, the fire department, yeah. Until next week, peace.
See you next week, everybody.
A Badge of Honor podcast is produced for the OBBM Network podcast and protected under copyright law. For content permissions, please submit your request to abadgeofhonor.com on the content page. For OBBM Network programming information, please call 214-714-0495.